Good morning. You're listening to Caregiver Crossing, a podcast brought to you by Joy's House. We are so blessed and thrilled that you're here. Caregiver Crossing is a podcast that's created just for you, the caregiver. I'm Tina McIntosh.
I'm Terry Stacy, and we're so glad that you are here with us today. Tina, why don't you explain a little bit about our next guest, and good luck with her name. It's a beautiful name, but I want you to actually say it. She's given us some warning on how to say it. Let's see if you can do it.
Well, that's really great. I appreciate all of your support with that. Really, really great.
You take it from there.
First of all, I'm going to give you a little bit of a quiz here. The CDC gives us a report that 1 in how many adults over the age of 65 fall every year? 1 in how many adults?
1 in how many?
Yep. Over the
1
age of
in 8
fall every year. 1 in 8. You are not even close. It's 1 in 4. 1 in 4 adults over the age of 65 fall every single year. So I
know it's really on the list. When you look at that list of things they're afraid of, it's right at the top. I'm afraid of falling.
Absolutely. And so while anyone at any age can have a fall, physical changes, health conditions, and medications used to treat those conditions, they make falls most likely as we continue to age. And so likewise, the consequences of a fall become more severe. And so that's why it's so important that we learn how to effectively manage fall risks, improving our strength and our balance and our mobility. And so that's why we're going to take this one slow. We have Stephanie Wierzbicka. Did I do it?
You sure did. It sounded great.
Who developed the Gaitway Fall Risk program at ComForCare. And she's here to discuss how that's done. And so Stephanie, thank you so much for being with us and for what you do.
Thanks for having me.
Well, we're delighted. And so we do want to talk about, we know that as we get older, it's more likely. We know the CDC report, but what are some of the most common risk factors for those falls?
Yeah, so you hit on a lot of great fall facts. I always think it's important to kind of create the framework, right, of just how big of a deal falls are, by you citing the CDC statistic of 1 in 4 older adults falling. It is true. And that's even just what's reported. And as you mentioned, falls have a tremendous impact on life and lifestyle, and the fear that most older adults gain or experience as a result of a fall. And even if they themselves didn't fall, but a neighbor did, is real. And usually what that does is it leads to decreased activities, which inevitably leads to another fall. So when we talk about older adults, we do talk about the fact that they are what we call multifactorial reasons that are risk factors that lead to them in the first place. And this is really the most surprising thing when it comes to falls, because a lot of older adults and their families just kind of assume, first of all, that falls are a normal part of aging, but they're not. So I kind of want to set the record straight on that. They are not a normal part of aging. And in most instances, there was some sort of underlying condition that led to that fall in the first place. So what we like to say is just as important as getting like your blood pressure screening when you go for your routine physical exams, you need to get a fall screening too. And what that will actually do, and a really good fall screening will actually hit on those risk factors that you asked me about that could lead to a fall in the first place. So believe it or not, there are actually 28 risk factors that lead to falls in folks 65 and older. Now, the tricky thing about those risk factors is that they change over time. So not only is it important to know, there's a list of 28 risk factors, but it's also important to know that those risk factors can change because they do kind of creep up on us as we get older. So when we look at those 28 risk factors, and I'm so glad you used that term because theoretically what we're trying to do is reduce the prevalence of falls. We can never really prevent them. But the way in which we can help improve an older adult's outcomes and just health in general is by first knowing what they are, okay? So there are 28, as I mentioned. I'm going to mention some of the biggies that I think is really important to consider when it comes to managing fall risk, okay? So the first I want to point out is what we call orthostatic hypotension. This is just kind of a surprising risk factor that some people are like, well, what the heck is that? So basically what it is your body's inability to regulate its own blood pressure from a laying to seated and then a seated to standing position. So sometimes if we get up too fast, have you ever felt like that blood rush to your head?
Been there, done that.
Okay. So that's kind of that feeling, and that all happens to us every once in a while, but if it happens repeatedly, it could be a sign of orthostatic hypotension. So you actually need to get an orthostatic hypotension blood pressure screening. It's a little bit different than what we're normally used to. Okay. So that's a biggie. The other, as you mentioned, is medications. I always say you literally cannot talk about falls without talking about medications. So the CDC does specifically cite that those that are on 8 or more are more likely to fall than those that are on 7 or less. But it's also important to look at the types of medications as well. So sometimes if we're taking too many or we're double dosing for the same condition, also some of our benzo type medications like Benadryl, sleeping type medications, some muscle relaxants, even some diuretics can actually lead to a fall. So most important thing I like to say about medications is a few things I think is really important for an older adult. Number one, try to get a medication checkup, meaning get all those meds in a brown bag, get them reviewed by a pharmacist that can literally look at them all and identify, are all of these medications necessary and are you on the optimal dose? The second is, now I'm kind of bad with this, but we have to use a single pharmacy. So what that means is don't go to the Walgreens and CVS's and everybody else. This is sometimes where we get in trouble and, those that are experts can't help do their job for you because they don't know what the other pharmacy is prescribing. So single source pharmacy. And the third thing, most importantly, is get those pills out of bottles and into what we call compliance packaging. Somebody in your local community, or we have some partners at ComForCare Home Care that they can actually package meds and deliver them straight to your door. That way you ensure right dose, right timing. You can see it all right in front of you. And even as you're popping those pills out, sometimes we've seen them even drop on the floor and the dog eat it. Not good. Okay. The number one leading cause of falls, though, in the United States. So I like to just pick out 3 of the main risk factors that I always say we have to know about. So I talked about orthostatic hypotension, the second being meds. The third is the number one leading cause of falls. And you kind of touched on it. It's poor lower extremity strength. So that means as we get older and kind of lead some more sedentary lifestyle, our balance and leg muscles get weaker. And most people fall on 2 feet. So there are some really specific exercises that folks can do to actually help improve those 2 things. And they're actually publicly available through the CDC. They're public domain tools. And in fact, I just wanted to mention the CDC has done some tremendous work on falls. They actually were involved in a 16-year study. And that study wrapped up in 2016 and had several journal articles published starting in 2019. And, based on this tremendous set of data, they literally have now declared falls a public healthcare crisis and have poured a ton of resources into developing different tools and strategies to really help older adults and their families make a big impact.
I have an elderly neighbor who lives independently and she has lost much of her sight. And we have learned that it's the way the house is laid out and the thing could cause her to fall. We've become very conscious of things like rugs and things like that could trip her up. Everybody wants her to live in her home independently as long as possible. But don't you think, sometimes we need to look around the house and think, well, this is a problem, right?
That's one of those risk factors. I mentioned there are literally 28. And one of them is the home environment, but it's not the leading cause of falls. That's why I didn't mention it, but you are right. The one thing I'd like to mention about home safety and ensuring it's set up properly. So you are right. Some throw rugs aren't appropriate, looking for cords, making sure the lighting is appropriate. But if an older adult's lived in their home for 20, 30, 40 years, sometimes it's important to keep certain pieces of furniture as is, because all of a sudden we've sort of have created this mental roadmap of where things are. And as individuals age, and if they end up getting diagnosed with dementia, that becomes an even more important factor to consider, because they literally might go looking for that chair that's really not there anymore, but used to be, and could fall as a result.
Good tip.
So yeah, so absolutely. We do look at home modifications. Bathrooms is usually where we see a majority of falls occur. That's a lot of times because sometimes we can't get our walking aid in there and we end up tripping on that. So we do want to look at different, what I like to call home modification strategies. And usually, we provide in-home care. So we're supporting folks in managing these risk factors. But if we identify that the home could be modified in some way to help allow that person to continue age in place, then one of our interventions would be to find a home modification company who could theoretically come in, do an even more in-depth review, and then make those recommendations and actually do the modification itself.
All right. So Stephanie, now I'm going to stumble over it. Wierzbicka.
And Stephanie W works just as well.
Oh, Stephanie, you're with ComForCare, and you created the Gaitway Fall Risk program, and we're grateful that you did. We only have a couple minutes left in the podcast for today. My biggest question at this point, because there's a lot that goes into this clearly. I mean, I believe there are 20, you said 28, is that right?
Yeah.
And it just blows my mind. How can people get their own risk assessment? Do they come to you for that, or how do they go about that?
Two ways, actually. So the first is, I always like to tell families and older adults this: home care providers are literally your perfect partner for fall risk management. Knowing there's 28 fall risk factors, that's overwhelming. So don't do this alone, right? Caregiving is a team sport. We say find your teammates. We are your best teammate, and ComForCare has a tremendous program that can help guide you through every single step of the way, starting with a screening. Now, we use 2 public domain screening tools provided to us by the CDC. We use the Stay Independent and Steady. Stay Independent was specifically written for the non-clinician and actually the older adult and their families to complete themselves. The other, Steady, is actually used for clinicians only. So really it's mainly designed for nurses or anyone with a license or letters after their name. The really cool thing about the Steady or Stay Independent form, is literally for that older adult to engage and complete this list of survey questions. Now here's the cool thing, and here's a little tip. As you answer those questions, there's actually point values associated with the way you answer. Over time, what we want to see is that point value to go down. So that's a really great pro tip that I love sharing with families and older adults, because that's the goal. Not just screen yourself and put it aside. It's what do we do with the information so we can make a positive impact?
Well, we're just grateful. What's a phone number that people can call to get a hold of you, to learn more, or a website they can go to?
Absolutely. So the first step would be go to ComForCare.com, which is COMF as in Frank, ORCARE.com, ComForCare.com. We actually have some resources there where you can find some fall risk strategy and just some in-depth information. Or you could call our 800 number and get routed to an individual location. You can also find our locator tool on our website, but the main number is 800-886-4044.
Well, Stephanie Wierzbicka, we're so glad that you are here and that you do what you do. Thank you for being our guest today. And as we close the show, if you have anyone that you'd like to be on the show to join us, if you want to be put in touch with Stephanie and you missed the information and you don't want to go back, you get a hold of me. We'll put you in touch. You can reach me at Tina, T-I-N-A, @joyshouse.org. We do want to say thank you to our sponsors at AARP. We're so grateful the way they are leading a revolution in the way people view and live life after the age of 50. I just signed up, by the way. My AARP membership is on its way via email. So I love that they're working to empower people to choose how they live as we age. So for the rest of you, thank you for being here on Caregiver Crossing. Until next week, take good care of each other, and we'll see you next week.